how can we live healthier, and perhaps should we move into an economy where it's not about money so much, but it's more about
Sure,
a health economy, a cognitive economy?
sure. Well, I don't think they weren't mutually exclusive. I think you're right in using the term lifespan and health span. At the moment, the one falls about 10 years short of the other. Yeah. So for many people, you have a health span and then you have a further 10 years of your life, a lifespan. And quite often for many people, that last 10 years, you have compromised mobility, compromised independence, perhaps a loss of dignity, or even worse, suffering, discomfort. And what we need to do is to think of ways in which the two co-terminate, so that you're very healthy and then you die. So, so you
Hmm.
don't have that 10 years of where the lifespan has stopped, but the health span has stopped, the lifespan is carrying on. You can't legislate things, but I think one can think of ways that would be conducive. So there's several. The one obvious one is physical exercise, and you don't have to legislate on doing physical exercise, but certainly I run in the mornings when I can. And although it doesn't solve the problems, when you come back, you feel as though you're across the problems and you can deal with them and they're not going to overpower you. And so, and running, which I started to do having played squash during COVID, because there's nothing else to do, is free, of course. All you need is a good pair of trainers, appropriate clothes. And it doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to negotiate with anyone. You just put your toe out the front door and you're away. So, so
You have
I
to
think
start.
physical, yes, I think physical exercise, and we know that enhances the growth of brain cells. It obviously helps with obesity. It ticks every box, yeah. And we know that even in older adults, enhances cognitive powers. Those that take physical exercise. So that is an obvious one. The second one, I think, is reading. Reading to children who perhaps don't have the literary skills, because that gives you an inner world that no one else can get into, which is why we often say the book is better than the film. If you don't have visual images, if you yourself are deriving them, and that is a skill that you learn, because when you're a kid, you read comics and there's picture books, and gradually you get weaned off those because you get the ability to generate these much more vivid images in your mind somehow. And if I said, whatever novel you're reading, what does your central character look like?
Hmm.
You probably couldn't say, but they do have a persona. And that's why you feel disappointed if you then see someone you've heard on the radio say, you then see what they look like. So you feel kind of let down.
They have a persona and they have a voice.
They do, they do. So they have that. And then, and reading to kids, I think, must be the loveliest thing. I remember we had a teacher in my kindergarten who read these horror stories of Baba Yaga, the wicked Russian witch that ate the heads of children. I still remember these stories. I told them to my brother when I was babysitting, which didn't go down too well, but they're very, very gripping when you're just there through the
Hmm.
power of words. And that is a huge cognitive ability that I think some young kids are not accessing. And then the third thing, and perhaps this is the hardest, is actually eating together, not having a mobile on, but sharing food, com-panion with bread. It's one of the most basic things human beings have done. It's a way of bonding. It's not just getting the right calories. It's a way of bonding with each other, of ritualizing things, of having a fixed order of things. And my own view is that anything that has a fixed order, a beginning, a middle, and end, is how we think. That's how a sentence works. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. And that's what a thought is. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, as opposed to an emotion, which is just there, just on its own. You scream, you cry, you shout. But a thought, you always end up in a different place than where you started. And I think that's echoed by sequences, by things we do as a sequence. That can be running and sport, it can be gardening, it can be eating, it can be cooking. Not in my case, but most people's could be cooking. So I think that they're the kind of activities that perhaps we do less nowadays. And you certainly can't pass laws to make people do those things. But they can be very fulfilling, and I think actually get you back in control. So you're not being driven by outside stimulation and outside web designers and so on. You're actually generating your own desires to do things, your own agenda, your own little life story, your own identity. Yeah, and I think that's very important for kids to do. So when you play a game, you say, let's make up a game. Yeah. And that's why the box is so much more exciting than the flashy toy, because it can be anything.
Always
And I think
using the
using a
brain.